Watch It Burn and Rest by D. Limeful. Chapter 5 Misunderstanding. 3 months later. Roman stared out the front viewport of their ship, ignoring the dust that was kicked up as Logan landed them without a hitch on the rough terrain. "Think it'll be this one?" he asked, without tearing his eyes away from the planet's surface. There was an exasperated sigh from behind him, and Logan stepped up next to him, all willowy limbs and glass carapace. "It is as likely to be this one as any of the other leads we have checked out, Roman. We have only word of mouth about Patton being spotted in one of the more populated areas here." Roman nodded, pushing the panel to open the ship exit bay. "Then let's search it as thoroughly as the others, huh?" Logan clicked in agreement and led the way onto their next lead. They'd been searching for hours when it happened. After ages of scouring old campsites, talking to suspicious locals, and dealing with local wildlife and atrocious weather, Roman was silently fuming. Soon, Logan would call the day a failure, and they would return to the ship for the night. Above them, the sky occasionally lit up with lightning, illuminating the surroundings brightly for a moment. It was building into a fine storm, one that would soon be dangerous, but Roman didn't want to turn back. If Patton had been there, he'd have made a joke about the weather, eased Roman's anger with the perceptive eye he had for emotions, lightened the spirits of the whole group. But Patton wasn't there. Hadn't been for far too long, and the two of them were falling into bad habits without him. "Roman," Logan said, stiff enough that he already knew what the Algorian was going to say, "we can go a little longer." "Roman, the weather." "Patton could be out there in that weather. We can't stop just because things get a little difficult. You do this every time." "Roman," Logan interrupted, but this time his voice had changed, eyes locked over his ridged shoulder with something desperate in them. Roman twisted around immediately, catching the soft, familiar blue glow in the distance. Without another word, he started towards it, barreling past prickly foliage with desperate hope building in his chest. The closer he got, the more certain he was that it was Patton's hue, Patton's glow. He burst into a small clearing, stopping short at the sight of fewer feathers than he had expected, and in that moment, lightning flashed. Roman stared at the wide-eyed human, sitting in the middle of a fresh campsite, familiar feathers hanging from a cord around its neck. For a moment, he was crushed under the weight of grief and shattered hopes. In the next moment, he was enraged. He found himself halfway across the clearing before he even realized he was charging, and though the human was fast enough to roll away from his horns, it wasn't fast enough to avoid the swipe of his claws. He watched with vicious satisfaction as the human reeled back with a curse, 4 bloody lines running from its collar to its cheek. He registered Logan calling his name distantly, but all that he could do was lash out again and again, knowing that humans had taken away another priceless part of his life. The human shifted into ferality as though it were made for it, eyes going empty and hard, flinging its body unnaturally to avoid blows and roll with hits. Roman kept swinging, scales sticking out aggressively to make him as big and sharp as he could be, and eventually he realized that he was screaming, slipping into the heavy, drawling tones of his native language as he cursed the monster out. From a distance, Logan was still at his back, hurling small, sharp projectiles and preventing the human from circling him properly. The human cast an irritated glance every time one hit, and Logan called out to Roman, "The toxins aren't working, Roman." "Yeah, it's a human. What did you expect?" he called back, grunting between words as he struggled to keep the human on the defense. Human attacks were insane. The only option was to prevent it from striking at all. Unfortunately, in the next second, lightning flashed, and Roman was blinded by the contrast for a moment too long. The human kicked out, sending him sprawling back. He realized that the human must have counted the gap between strikes before now and braced for the follow-up attack that was sure to come. It didn't come. He climbed to his feet, staring at the human. It was looking around nervously, an eye on Roman as it backed up. Did it have others with it? Roman felt a chill. They could maybe take one human, but multiple? They'd be doomed. And while he was furious, Roman refused to lose Logan, too. He sprinted forward while the human was distracted, head low. If he could just take this one out before it called for the others, they could escape. "Stop!" A small blue blur found its way between him and the human, and he pulled up short at the harsh whistle, skidding to a stop. There stood Patton, feathers bright and puffed out as far as they would go, arms spread wide, and his back to the human. Roman froze, as though any sudden movement would prompt the Death Worlder into action. "Patton?" Logan said calmly from behind him, only the slightest tremble in his voice giving away his fear. Step away from the human. The human in question was heaving loud breaths, eyes darting frantically between Logan and Roman, limbs twitching. So Roman really couldn't be blamed for the hoarse, pained sound he made when Patton turned to it and held his tiny hands out, as though soothing a small forest creature instead of a literal human. Behind him he could hear Logan's spines shifting. Patton began speaking lowly in what sounded like nonsense, and the human dropped to its knees next to Patton. Roman twitched forward, but it wasn't attacking. It was simply sitting there, leaned over Patton without removing its eyes from either of them, arms braced around the empen, not threateningly, but protectively? It's okay, Virgil. I know them. They're my shipmates. They won't hurt me, and I won't let them hurt you, okay? Promise, Patton said, chirping almost soft enough that Roman couldn't hear it. The humans seemed to understand, muttering something back in a mix of common and Patton's home tongue. Patton bobbed his head, reaching out and patting the human's uninjured cheek. Roman felt as though he'd stepped into an alternate universe. I'm going to go and say hello to them, okay? Patton told him, and the human just slowly withdrew, straightening up so it wasn't hunched over Patton, tucking long arms up against itself. Patton bared his teeth at the human, prompting a strangled squeak from Logan, and then turned and hurtled toward the two of them like a bright blue star. Roman bumped foreheads with him, Patton standing on his toes to reach, and for a moment he was able to forget the human standing mere meters away. I'm so happy to see you guys, Patton said in a tearful whisper, clasping a hand with one of Logan's delicately. It said something about how deeply Patton's absence had affected them that Logan allowed the gentle touch. In the next moment, Patton had reached up and grabbed Roman's ear, tugging harshly on it. So what were you thinking pulling a stunt like that? You could have gotten seriously hurt, and you already did hurt Virgil. Virgil? Roman echoed dumbly. Patton rolled his eyes, pointing at the human who was watching Patton anxiously while pretending not to. You tamed it? Patton's feathers flared up angrily, and he pulled harder on Roman's ear. He is my friend, and the only reason I got off that smuggler's ship instead of dying a slow and painful death, so you will be nice to him or else. But Patton... Of course, Logan cut in, ignoring the dirty look Roman sent him. You are the only person I know who could get kidnapped and come back with an adopted human, Patton. I assume the feathers around his neck are a token of friendship, like the ones you gave us? You assume right. Patton preened for a moment and then broke away from them, gesturing, Come on, come meet him! Roman made a noise of objection in his throat, but Patton was already bounding back to the human, who folded in to listen. Logan began to walk over as well, and he dug his claws into the ground in protest. Logan! Come on, you of all people know this is a bad idea. The Algorian paused for only a moment, raising an eyebrow at Roman. I do, but I trust Patton, and I know you do as well. Roman groaned as he walked off, following only a second after. He wasn't willing to leave his friends alone next to a human. It's not Patton I have to worry about trusting, he muttered. The human eyed them warily as they approached, stiffening his back slightly. Patton was a tiny figure against him, but Logan was around half his size, and Roman nearly matched him for height. Logan approached with his eyes obligingly averted, but Roman glared at him head-on, refusing to submit. Virgil, this is Logan and Roman. Virgil, Patton said, nearly sitting on the human with how close he was. The human didn't seem bothered by this at all, a hand nearby for Patton to lean on if he lost balance. Pleasure to meet your acquaintance, Logan started. I want to thank you for helping Patton and making sure he didn't get hurt. The human stared at Logan for a long moment, making Roman bristle, and then seemed to register the words. Oh, yeah. He helped. I would not have got out without him. He spoke slowly, occasionally stumbling over a word. He was pressing a sleeve to the cuts on his body and avoided eye contact with the both of them, though his lips twitched upwards when Patton made a strange hand sign at him, baring his teeth again. Logan jabbed a crystalline elbow into Roman's side, and he hissed in protest. Yeah, a pleasure, he grunted out, resisting the urge to let his lip curl. Logan sighed and continued. I apologize for using my toxins on you. I have an antidote if you need it. Virgil blinked. Don't worry about it. It feels just like mosquito bites, to be honest. Earthbug, Patton explained when Logan looked at him quizzically. The three of them all shuddered at the thought of Earth fauna. There was a pause, and Roman very pointedly did not apologize for the sluggishly bleeding scratches along Virgil's face. "Well, we should get going then." Patton broke the silence, still occasionally reaching out as though to check they were really there. Roman's heart broke a little each time, cursing the smugglers that had taken him away. Virgil nodded, jerky, and then stood, making everyone but Patton flinch back slightly. "Sorry," he muttered, as he made his way over to the supply bags at the campsite and then carried them over to Patton. "Well trained," Roman sniped in his own language, and Patton gave him a sharp look. Virgil stepped back a bit, accidentally drawing all their attention. Stay safe. Don't get kidnapped. Again," he added, with a casual expression that didn't quite fit the desolate look in his eyes. Patton tilted his head, confused, but Logan spoke first. "Is Virgil not coming with us?" he asked, curious. "Yes, of course he is," Patton said. "No, don't worry," Virgil said at the same time. They looked at each other with surprise. Roman felt a spark of hope. Was the human going to stay here after all? You don't want to come?" Patton asked, antenna flattening. Virgil reacted as anyone should to Patton's feelings being hurt, waving his hands to dispel the thought. Roman tried not to twitch at the erratic movement. "I do. I would. But they're your family. They're here to take you home. I helped you survive, but I doubt they want a human in their home," Virgil said. And though Roman had just been thinking that, he hadn't expected the human to acknowledge it. "It's okay. I'm good at surviving. You don't have to look after me, Patton." Patton's feathers were all slicked down now, and his voice was tremulous when he spoke again. "Virgil, you're a part of my family. You deserve to have a home too. I'm not going to leave you alone again, not even if that means staying here on this planet until the rest of my family comes around." Virgil blinked, eyes wide, and Logan cut in. "I don't think that will be necessary. Though you may have trouble with some of the shorter doorways, our ship is plenty large enough to accommodate a human. There may be some culture clash, so to speak, but you have shown little to none of the traits assigned to humans by rumor, and I don't believe you have malignant intent." Oddly enough, the human looked to him next, disoriented. Roman snorted, crossing his arms. "Don't expect my blessing. I don't trust you, at all. But we owe you a debt of gratitude. Giving you a proper place to stay will have to suffice." The human shuffled, discomfited. "Patton is clever. He could have gotten out on his own, eventually. You don't owe me anything." Logan looked ready to jump in with a depressing factoid about survival rates, so Roman sighed dramatically. "Yes, but he would have been alone. Thank you," he forced out through gritted teeth, "for being there with him." Him, thanking a human. He never thought he'd see the day. Still, it seemed to have done the trick. The human exhaled slowly, glancing up at them. "Okay, I'll come then?" Patton cheered and then scaled the human like a tree, settling on a shoulder and telling Logan to lead the way. Virgil seemed very used to the perch treatment, and Roman tried and failed not to be jealous that he was too spiky to offer his own shoulder. Logan began to talk about what medicine they had aboard the ship that was presumably safe for humans. Logan sighed, looking up at the storm overhead as they hurried back to the ship. He had a feeling this was going to be a rocky adjustment period.